Philp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let me start by saying that the Right Honourable Member for Chingford and Woodford Green is one of the most decent and compassionate men I've ever met. And the slurs we just heard on his motivation are completely unacceptable and have no place in a calm and civilised debate. And I must say, some Labour members today, such as the member for East Ham, have set an extremely fine example in how these matters can be debated in a calm and proper way. And I always listen to what he has to say very carefully, because it's very thoughtful and well delivered. Madam Deputy Speaker, let's remind ourselves why universal credit was introduced in the first place. The reason it was introduced in the first place is because the previous system was broken and was not fit for purpose. It was broken and not fit for purpose because there were effective marginal taxation rates of over 90% in many cases, and there were cliff edges, for example, at 16 hours of work, meaning that people looking to work more hours would actually be worse off if they did so, and people would come to us as constituency MPs and say, we are not going to work any more hours because there'll be less money in our pocket afterwards. That is clearly a completely unacceptable situation, and that's why this reform, in principle, is so necessary. Now, we've heard some individual cases today about errors that have been made in the system, which are obviously very, very regrettable, and I know ministers will work to correct when they see them. But let's not forget that there are almost 6 million people in receipt of these benefits, either the old ones or the new ones. And when you're handing out 6 million payments a month, then there are bound to be the occasional individual errors. So let's not confuse those very regrettable individual errors with a more systematic issue. Now, when it comes to the universal credit rollout, there were some issues that were systematic that were identified, and steps have been taken in the last 6 or 9 months to address some of those. Yes, I will.
I'm grateful, because he's mentioned two categories, one systemic problems and two individual problems. Surely with the latter, that is where you go to the department, that is where you go to your local Job Centre Plus and say, please address this, something has gone wrong. And with the former, where it is systemic, you adopt the approach of this government by testing the system, by learning and by adapting and changing it.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, as always. And on the question of some systemic issues, which there were, measures have been taken to address those. And let me mention a couple of examples. One is that housing benefit now gets paid for another 2 weeks after the change to address some of the issues with rent arrears that members have quite properly raised. And secondly, you can now get 100% advance, which addresses the point the Right Honourable Member for East Ham raised earlier, and the 7-day wait has also been eliminated. Now, there is one other bit of fine-tuning I might just ask the Minister to think about, which relates to the period where you calculate eligibility. And it is possible, I believe, that if someone receives their last salary payment, particularly if it's quite a large salary payment, towards the end of the last month in employment, in the next month they may not be eligible to receive a universal credit payment because that last payment in work counts towards the calculation. And I think that does. I've got an individual constituency case of that, and that I think does those dates, the fine-tuning around those dates, I think does need to be studied a little more carefully. I'd be happy to sit down with the Minister and go through the particulars of the case. It is quite technical and quite complicated, but I would be happy to go through that if it would assist the Minister in his work. Now, my constituency, Croydon South, is the joint highest constituency for the number of people who have been moved across. It's 43%. There are only 2 or 3 other constituencies in the country that are that high at that level. So I think we've got quite a good base of evidence in Croydon South. Now, during the debate, when, in fact, it was the SNP frontbench member who said that we should take with a pinch of salt what members on this side say about a lorry load of salt, he was by what we say about how it's operated in our constituency. Now, that was, of course, a slur on the integrity of members on this side of the House. But I contacted my caseworker during this. I contacted my caseworker during this debate to ascertain the facts. Now, in Croydon, there are around about, by my estimation, 4,000 people currently in receipt of universal credit, because 43% have migrated. That's my estimate, so it may not be exactly right, but it's probably somewhere in the region of 4,000. In the last 6 months, we have had 21 cases contact me as the constituency Member of Parliament, some of which were to do with eligibility questions like whereabouts they live. So I would say 21 individual cases out of about 4,000 is not an excessive number of queries, but of course where they're raised, I know ministers will look to deal with them. Now, people opposite have suggested this is about cuts. I would respectfully remind members again that disability benefits paid to people who are disabled have gone up to 54 billion in total. That's a substantial real terms increase. So this is not about cuts. There's more money going into disability benefits than at any time in history. And I would just conclude by saying that a measure of your compassion and a measure of government success in terms of policy and welfare isn't how much money you spend in aggregate. It's getting people out of poverty and into prosperity, and you do that through work. Thank you.